Rain pounded on the asphalt as Sarah clutched the bloodied letter in trembling hands. She had meant for this to happen, not in her worst nightmares. Her husband, Alan, had been declared dead 2 months ago, killed during a terrorist hostage crisis. She'd spent weeks mourning, only to be haunted by the emptiness in their marriage. Alan had grown distant before his disappearance, cold even, as if her presence was a weight. In her grief, she signed the divorce papers she had prepared in anger before the tragedy struck. The guilt came later, but by then, the deed was done. Weeks after the divorce became final, Alan resurfaced. Alan hadn't died in the explosion at the embassy. He had escaped, using every ounce of cunning and resourcefulness to shield the hostages and lead them to safety. His injuries were extensive, but the worst part wasn't his near-death experience. It was coming back to a world where his wife had moved on without him. "Why did you do it, Sarah?" Alan's voice cracked, an unfamiliar blend of rage and heartbreak. He had shown up unannounced at her door, his once sharp frame gaunt, his eyes dark pools of betrayal. "Alan, you were gone. They told me you weren't coming back." Sarah's tears spilled freely. She reached for him, but he stepped back as if her touch might burn him. "You didn't wait," he whispered. "You didn't even try." Alan's sacrifice hadn't been solely for the hostages. Amid the chaos, he'd been negotiating with the captors, offering himself as leverage while he relayed crucial information to an anonymous caller. The mysterious voice on the line had promised to save them all, including him. Only later had Alan realized that the voice was Sarah's lover, Jason. Jason had planted the seeds of doubt in Alan's mind for months. He'd poisoned Sarah against him subtly, building himself as the one she could rely on. And when Alan was declared dead, Jason had swooped in, consoling her until she filed the divorce papers. Alan had spent weeks piecing it together, his suspicion turning into cold, calculated fury. "I didn't know," Sarah screamed. "Jason said you weren't coming back. He told me to move on." Alan stared at her, his hands trembling. "And you believed him?" His tone was venomous. "I gave my life to save yours, Sarah. And while I was crawling out of hell, you handed my place to him." Sarah crumpled to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. "I didn't know, Alan. Please, you have to believe me." But Alan had stopped believing long ago. Days later, Sarah awoke to silence. Alan was gone again, this time leaving behind only a note. "I protected you once. I won't make that mistake again." The words chilled her to the bone. Something was off about their simplicity. Alan wasn't just leaving, he was planning something. Jason's face flashed in her mind, and dread filled her chest. Jason's body was found in his office 2 weeks later, a single bullet lodged in his chest. The police ruled it a suicide, citing mounting debts and professional failures. But Sarah knew better. The strange, untraceable number Alan had mentioned, the one Jason had used to manipulate him, had led Alan straight to the truth. Sarah wanted to confront him, to beg for forgiveness, but Alan had vanished, leaving no trace behind. Months passed, and Sarah tried to rebuild her life. She wanted to believe Alan was still alive, even as guilt gnawed at her. Then, one cold evening, she found an envelope on her doorstep. Inside was a photo of Alan standing in front of a dilapidated cabin in the mountains. Written on the back were 4 haunting words. The weight of his words crushed her. Alan had sacrificed everything, not just once, but twice. First for her safety, and now for her freedom. His death, or the specter of it, was the only way he could truly let go. Sarah clutched the photo to her chest, whispering a silent prayer. She knew Alan wasn't coming back. He had chosen to live in the shadows, ensuring her safety from afar while bearing the pain of her betrayal. But somewhere in the mountains, a man with hollow eyes watched her from afar, guarding the one love he had lost but could never let go.